What's up? This is T Briz from Briz Beats. Today we're going to be making a 90s style grimy boom bap beat. To get right into it, I'm going to show you a sample of the final beats that we're going to make today. We're actually going to make two beats. We're going to make one beat that is made using all virtual instruments. It's going to be all MIDI tracks. So that's the challenge, to try to get these MIDI tracks to sound a little bit like they came from a sample and give them a grimy-ish feel. Then we're going to be printing that melody down to a wave file, and we're going to import it back into Slicex, and we're going to flip it into a second beat. So we're going to get two beats out of this tutorial. Here's an example of the first beat. Here's what it sounds like. Okay, so we're going to make that, and then like I said, we're going to flip this into this next beat. Here's an example of what the Slicex version of that MIDI melody sounds like. Alright, so believe it or not, that is just the first melody that we create today, and then it's flipped in Slicex to sound different. Alright, we'll keep it simple and we'll just end the intro there and let's get right into the video. Let's go. Alright, we got a new project started. First thing I want to do is change the tempo. 90s hip hop is typically somewhere between 85 BPM and 95 BPM, though you can definitely go lower or higher than that depending on the track. We're going to go with 94 BPM today. Done. Next step, we're going to get into the drums. It's going to be the first instrument that we're going to lay down. There's quite a wide range of what could be considered grimy boom bap drum sounds. Today, let's just go with something that's hard-hitting, sounds like it's got some dirt on it, like it was ripped off vinyl. It sounds so saturated, distorted, old school. There's a plugin that I used to use a lot when I first started making boom bap for this type of drum sound that I'm describing. It's called Drum Weapons 3. We'll pull it up here so you can see it. Here's a quick example of what this one kit sounds like. You can hear the dirt on that snare already. It comes with 530 boom bap kits. So take a look at this. This is the screen. You can even scroll down. There's more down here. Look at all that. Out of these 530 kits, there are some great sounding drum samples in here and also some not so great ones. And then there's some just zany and off the wall sounding kits that are almost experimental sounding sometimes. It's cool for what it is, but this plugin doesn't give me the level of control that I like to have over my drum parts when I use it to write the drums. I still recommend it, especially if you're just getting into boom bap. It's fun to play with. Eventually what I wound up doing though was ditching the interface and taking all of the sounds that the interface was hooked up to. I found them on my computer and I linked it to a folder in FL Studio, which is right here. And they might even actually sell the sound selection on the modernproducers.com website as well, I think. But anyway, I mix and match the pieces from these drum kits that came with Drum Weapons 3. So I'm going to delete these. We're going to look for a hi-hat sound first. That first one is fine. It's got some dirt on it. Sounds like it was ripped off vinyl. Let's put it right in here. Before we even move on to the next instrument, I pretty much know what I'm going to do for the hi-hats because it's really simple. I'm going to draw in my hi-hats just like this. I'm going to copy them out. I think we're going to go for 4 bars. We're going to take this same hi-hat. We're going to copy it over, and while it's selected, I'll hold Alt and I'll mouse wheel down just to give a little bit of variation of velocity. At this point, a lot of people like to humanize the hi-hats by either playing them by hand so they're a little bit off and not completely quantized, or they'll add some swing to it. For this video, I'm not going to get too into that. Really just want it to sound dirty. It can be in time, and that's fine. Here's what it sounds like. Great. Alright, so next up, let's just drop in the snare. Why not? Because I know where the snare is going to be pretty much. You know, when you think of specific genres, there's always kind of like that go-to beat in punk rock. It's do-do-ch, do-do-ch, do-do-ch. Like reggaeton, it's like do-ch, 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 do-ch. I'm going to use one of those for hip-hop. When I think like 90s hip-hop, I think of Real simple, so let's just roll with that. It's a good starting point for a lot of hip-hop tracks. So let's find our snare. That sounds fine. Snare, piano roll. And then let's get the kick. Fine, grab that kick, drop it in here. Let's go to the piano roll. One thing I do want to do is, right on this part, this one is just volumes a little bit lower. It's just an old trick that people have been using for ages. So now that I got this whole part in here, we're going to copy it just to make it go out for our 4 bars. So we got the whole drum part there. And while we're at it, we're talking velocities. Let me select all here. You see that velocity going up on the bottom, Alt mouse wheel. I'll bring all my kicks up to the top there, top velocity. And I'm also going to go back into the snare, Control A, Alt mouse wheel up. And put the snares all the way up. Maybe the hats need to come up a little bit as well. That's fine. And I'm going to wind up changing the volume from the faders down here at some point anyway. But this is all good. Let's get rid of this clap track. I don't need a clap right now, so just going to get rid of that. Let's add one little thing in the middle, which is the open hi-hat. So I found this open hi-hat right here. Brick City. Let's drop this on. And we're going to put this right there, and right here too. We'll bring the volume up a bit on that, and we put these 2 in here, and it just sounds like this. Add a little something. That's it. Simple drum part. And this is a go-to great starting point, especially if you're having one of those days where you're not feeling super creative and you can't come up, or you're not hearing a melody, or you're not hearing a drum beat in your head. This is the go-to. Just start with this. And then you wind up changing it later, or sometimes you wind up leaving it. Right, so we got the drums. Now let's get on to the melody. You can notice that my project is a little bit fuller now. I went ahead and made the melody, and I'm going to review step by step the elements that it's comprised of and my thought process throughout the whole thing. So let's talk sound selection. My thought process, 90s boom bap, not all of it, but a lot of it uses samples from many genres of music, classic rock, funk, soul, reggae, etc. One of the things that many of the samples have in common is that they are from bands that play real instruments, guitars, pianos, flutes, string sections, etc.
Etc.
We're using digital stuff, but I want to pick some virtual instrument VSTs that sound more like live instruments. This is not a requirement or a set rule for boom bap music or 90s boom bap. There's synths, there's digital sounding stuff as well, but it's just one way to do it, and it's how we're going to do things today. So the first instrument we're going to add is a guitar. Here's my guitar right here. I hope the screen isn't too cluttered for you guys. When I click on the guitar, we have this contact library. It's vintage rhythm section by Big Fish Audio. Go down to instruments here. I'm in the rock guitars, and I'm in clean tremolo surf guitar. You see that up here too. Clean tremolo surf guitar. So I didn't do too much tweaking on this bottom half of the plugin. What I did do is tune down the pitch knob by 2. You're going to see this as a common theme throughout the rest of the project, as I tuned down a lot of these digital instruments. You know, a strategy of a lot of beats that are made with samples is they'll either pitch it up or pitch it down. And when you pitch something down, it gives it a darker, more grimy sound, in my opinion. So since we're working with instruments and we're not working with a sample, at least for this first beat, we're going to pitch down the individual instruments to get a deeper, darker sound, more grimy sound going forward with our digital instruments. So let's close this up and take a look at the notes. I started simple with this one. I chose 2 chords, and then all I did was line them up a little bit off like this to give it the feeling that they were being strummed like a guitar would strum, like this. That's like a guitar, like a picking each one. So listen, here's the notes. The other thing I did here was I purposely stopped the notes when the snare hits. So it's like snare, snare. It leaves a little bit of room for some other stuff to happen inside the melody going forward. So I keep it real simple on my first track, so it leaves room for me to move around with the other instruments that we're going to add after this. So this is this. I didn't do anything with the velocities or anything for now. You know, if I would have played this live, the velocities would have been a little bit variated, which gives it a more humanistic feel, but we're not going to get too into that today. So these are the notes for our 2 chords that are basically the pad notes for the entire beat. Moving on, so again, sticking with the live instruments, I went ahead and added a clavinet. It's from another Kontakt library. I believe you can get this one for free, and it plays in the free version of Kontakt. You probably don't have to buy this one. The other one you have to buy. This one, this is great for instruments that sound like live sounding instruments. It looks like for this clavinet, I didn't pitch this one down. And I know I left the settings exactly the way they were straight out of the box. So knowing that and having our instrument selected and ready to go, we can close out of this and we can go into the piano roll for the clavinet to see what the notes look like. Now you can see there's a little bit more going on here than there was with the guitar. The guitar was just simple pad notes to give me a bass to work around, and now I'm trying to make it more interesting. Here's what it sounds like. Just the clav part really quick. If I want to explain the bass of this melody, I heard a melody in my head, and it was bum, 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 bum. And here's the bass of that melody, what I was just mouthing out. So you go ahead and get that melody in there first. Basically, I beefed these up by adding extra notes. I don't know the music theory behind it. I just listen for what sounds good. You know what I mean? So I started with that simple melody we just showed you, and then I said, I need, you know, to make this one note into a chord. And now, and this part, to be honest, I think this was an accident. I accidentally put a couple notes where I didn't want them, and then I played it, and it sounded good. To me, I was like, all right, that's cool. Let's just leave it. Experimentation. When you're playing with melodies, just experiment. Try different things. Don't worry about too much, like knowing ahead of time what works. Put a note down, listen to it, and if it sounds good, then it works. And it's subjective, because somebody could be listening to this and be like, yo, that don't sound good. What are you talking about, Briz? And I'd be like, well, for me, it sounds good for this tutorial video. But I think you get the point of the theory that I'm talking about, which is less about knowing what works music theory-wise versus just knowing what works by using your ear and listening. Not that it's a bad thing to know music theory. Of course, it's great. Okay, so that's the whole clav part. The melody's sounding pretty strong as far as I'm concerned, so I wanted to add a little bit more support, maybe like an ambient sound, going with the live instrument feel. I went and hunted down a flute to go in the background. I used a vintage horns plugin by Big Fish Audio, and I tuned it down by 14. And again, I didn't play with the settings. I mean, I could do a whole video on using the settings for this kind of stuff, so I didn't really touch anything. I just left it and tuned it down, and I wanted something ambient. So let me close out. That was the soprano flute, by the way, the soprano flute, vintage horns. So if I turn on the flute part, I'll play it with the other instruments. Just listen for the flute now. Just very simple, 2 notes per bar. Da, 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 da. To me, this is all just about adding another layer. As you notice, I got 6 instruments on here. I don't know if you can see that. Trumpets, flute, guitar, clav, harp, bass. That's 6 instruments. That's 6 layers. When I would get to the part of this beat where I'd want to do arrangement, it leaves me a lot of options. The main melody is already set with the guitar and the clav. With the flute and the trumpets I'm going to show you, and the harp, we're just creating some extra layers to add ambience and support that main melody a little bit. I guess I'll mention the other thing I did with the flute. As you can see, I have it routed to insert 6 here. I didn't pay too much attention to mixing on this, just light mixing. I could do a whole nother video on that too. I did add a little bit of an EQ to take some of the low end off of it. You can see it's got a strong low end. Especially since I pitched it down, I think I got a little bit deeper. So I just cut that, and it is what it is right now. Really, that's it for the flute. Let's get on to the next one. How about the trumpets? Let's see if you can hear the trumpets in here now. It's the... Again, it's just another layer. It's not complex with melody. It's two notes that are sort of just droning in the background that have a little bit of rhythm to them because it's ba ba. It adds harmony, and it's going to be great when I arrange this beat later on down the line. For the trumpets, again, I use the Vintage Horns plugin. This one is Vintage Horns 2 by Big Fish Audio. If you haven't noticed, I use their stuff a lot for live instrument sounds. There's a funk soul category of plugins by them. And I got this one tuned down 14 also. And I didn't touch anything on this. I just kind of left it the way it was for this tutorial for now, just to keep it simple. So that's it for the trumpets. Then I wanted like a hit, like a one-shot sound. So I used the harp for that. Let's see if you can hear the harp now. You hear that sound? So there's the harp. I was going for sort of a more of a sound effect than a melody. So the harp is from the Spitfire Audio BBC Symphony Orchestra plugin. I got the harp plucks selected. I did not tune this one down at all then, but I did add some effects to it because I was going for like a sound effect with this. You see, I EQ'd it. No explanation. I just kind of EQ'd it by ear to take some of the low end off and a little bit of the high end. I guess I was just finding where it was doing what I wanted it to do. Then what I often do with a lot of samples or instrument plugins or whatever, I ran it through an amp simulator. This is Bias Effects 2. So even though it's a harp, I ran it through a plugin that simulates guitar amps. It's going to add some character and color to it. It made it so you can't even tell it's a harp. Added some distortion. This has its own reverb pedal on it. Here's a tip. An amp simulator plugin is great to make any instrument sound like something else. I mean, listen, this don't even sound like a harp. I mean, maybe you can tell it's a harp, but it just sounds like a sound effect. And then I added Isotope Trash. I believe this is a free plugin just to distort it a little more and get some more saturation out of the harp to make it even more less like a harp, to make it more like a sound effect where I was going with it. And you can see I kind of just found a chord and I put it just right where I wanted that sound effect to hit. And again, that's just another layer. That harp is not going to be playing the entire time this beat is happening. In my head, I'm already thinking that harp's going to pop in during a chorus part. That's it for the harp. Let's get on to the very last instrument on the list, and that is the bass. Couple thoughts about bass and sampled music and 90s boom bap. A lot of different ways you can go. You could go with 808s, you could go with live sounding basses. A lot of times bass was ripped off of vinyl as well and then sampled the bass sounds onto the tracks. Synthesizers were used. So many different ways to go about it, but sticking with the theme for this video, I'm doing the live instruments. So I chose a bass virtual instrument that was more of a live sounding bass. Here it is. Again, I just went with the classic bass from the Contact Factory selection. Classic bass. I didn't tweak any of the settings. I did tune it down to give it a deeper sound when I put it into my piano roll. And then I also mixed it to add some effects to it as well. I'll get into the mix after. First, let's look at the bass line. A lot of different ways you can go with the bass line. Sometimes you get a simple bass where it just hits on the first note of every measure, like boom. That's one way to go. You see that a lot in 90s boom bap. I went with a little bit more of a driving bass line. Let me play it for you. If you don't have headphones on and you're on mobile, you might not hear the bass, but let's listen to it. See how it matches the kick drum for the most part? I was going for that. You don't have to do that, but it is a common technique you see in all types of music. So let's talk about what I did when I mixed it. I EQ'd it, rolled off a little bit of the low end, and rolled off a little bit of the high end. We'll just lowered it. I guess I didn't completely roll it off. And then I ran this through Bias Effects as well to make the bass sound more like a live instrument. Unlike what I did with the harp, where I was trying to make it not sound like a harp, in this case, I was actually trying to make the bass sound more like a live bass that was played through an amp head. So I went through their presets and I found this one for bass, Easy Steps. And I just like the way it sounded. It was kind of gritty and it was kind of grimy sounding. You can hear it's saturated now. It's a little distorted. It sounds a little bit more like live bass. I think that's it for the bass. So we have a full beat with multiple layers that's ready to go into arrangement. We're not going to do arrangement today. I am going to make another video where I arrange this track. If you subscribe to my channel, I would be appreciated. Keep an eye out for that video. It's coming. One last thing about the master fader on this beat. To give it a little bit more of a grimy and vintage boom bap sound, I put an RC20 plugin directly on the master fader with a little bit of noise. It gives it that vinyl noise. It's like background noise on the track that makes it sound like a record is playing, gives it some dirt, just a tiny bit of wobble and distortion. We saturated the entire mix. Everything coming through here gets a little bit of distortion. And I left a little bit of this magnetic up too. It's basically, when you get in here, you just kind of tweak these till it hits what your ear likes to hear. You know what I mean? There's no set rule for this kind of stuff, especially given whatever track you're trying to make. And then I also did allow the EQ to cut. It's sort of a roll-off. I have the soft roll-off mode checked off here, and the soft roll-off on the high end, and then it gives you the spots where you want it to roll off. Usually I will run all of my melodies through a group track and just kind of run the melodies through this, because that makes the melody sound like a little bit more sampled. But just as a shortcut today, I threw it on the master track, so even the drums and the bass are coming through this. You know, there's a bunch of different ways you can do it, but I just wanted to bring it up that the RC20 will help you get a grimy, dirty sound as well. Now, as a bonus, I'm going to take this one step further, and I'm going to take this one beat, and now we're going to flip the melody from this beat, and we're going to make a totally separate second beat. 2 beats out of 1 beat. Let me show you what I'm talking about. I muted these channels, all the drum channels and the bass channel, leaving just the melody tracks playing. So what I'm going to do is go out here. This is one way to do it. And pattern 1 is where all those channels are. And I'm going to export this as a WAV file. Let's go to File, Export, WAV file. We'll name this something like Melody Loop Only. Save it. You want to take a look at these settings. Go ahead, start. Okay. So here's the file, Melody Loop Only. So what we're going to do is add a Slicex track. We're going to open Load Sample. We're going to navigate to our sample. We're going to open it, and Slicex sliced it up for us already using some default stuff. I have a good tutorial, especially for beginners, on using this plugin Slicex. It's like basics. I'm going to link that down in the description. So I'm not going to get too into Slicex today. We're just going to simply pitch it all the way down and leave the default slices that they left for us here, and we're going to rearrange this and flip it into something new. I'm going to hit my keyboard. You can hit these buttons down here to hear what the sounds sound like now. With it pitched all the way down, it's going to be a slower tempo, and it's going to sound even more dark. There's one of the slices. You can see now we're getting some different sounds out of this sample. So I'm just going to close Slicex, and in the piano roll for Slicex, I went ahead and rearranged it. This is what it sounds like. Here's all the parts. I got this sound. We got this sound. We got this sound. So now I have everything muted except for my my drums and the new Slicex track that we added. So let's play it with the Slicex remix. And then I went ahead I made another bass line that fits this because this is pitched down now. Our old bass line wouldn't work on here. So all I had to do was add one more bass line, and now I got a second full track. So I Slicexed it, and then I added this bass line to it, which is similar to the other bass line. There we go. So now I got two beats. I made one beat and then I flipped it into another beat and I got two beats out of it. Go watch my other tutorial on Slicex if you want to know more about how to flip your samples with Slicex. Link in the description. And that's it for the tutorial. It's kind of a long one, so I appreciate it if you made it this far, and I hope you learned something, and I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments what other type of tutorials you'd like to see. Also, please go subscribe over on my beats channel. The link to that is in the description. I'll be posting both of these full beats arranged and completed to that channel. There's going to be another video on the way where I arranged the first beat that we made today, so subscribe to me on this channel. Have a great day, everybody. Appreciate it. Peace out.